Okay.
We thought class was canceled.
No, I apologize. Sometimes I'm late. I'm late. Put your name in the chat.
We beat you there in the wiki.
Well, I don't. It's not recorded until I get here. So if you, so you've got to put it in.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sometimes things happen, and I'm late. So I apologize. Okay. Oh, let's see here. Okay, let me get myself calmed down. First of all, the quizzes. All the chapter quizzes are open. Okay, and they'll remain open until the evening of the 5th of December. So you can, if you've missed a chapter quiz, you can go in there and you can retake it for a grade. If there's room for improvement and you've already taken a quiz, but you think you can do better, you can retake them. And of course, that's a really good way to study for the exam. I use some of those questions on the final exam, and so you can go in there and look at some of those questions and practice, and so that stuff is open. Forums and assignments, try and have those in by the 7th. Okay, by the 7th, all those things should be there. The final exam will open on the 7th. Okay, and it will close on the evening of the 8th. So between the 7th and the 8th, you'll have to take the final exam. It's worth 150 points, so half again more than the regular exams. And let's just go take a look here on the schedule. Okay, let's put this over to the side. I've got to see how to do that. Okay, there we can do that. You see the lecture topics and assigned readings? Anybody? Maybe yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we've covered 16 chapters, and there will be questions from all of the chapters on the exam. However, there will be extra stuff on the last 2 chapters because we haven't had anything on those yet. So figure about 1/3 of the exam will be chapter 15 and 16. And then 2/3 of the exam will be materials from earlier chapters. So that includes chapters 1 through 14. And if you, there'll probably be more from things on from chapter 15 or chapter 5 on. First exam contained some background materials on the human body, lots of cellular stuff, and so there'll be the chemistry of cells and cell organization and cells, and then tissues are really just organized cells. So that there'll be materials on those from that first exam on there, but probably less from there than materials from exams 2 and 3. Not saying that that's not important, but it's of less importance. Let's go to another. Let's go to the review PowerPoint I had up there, and let's just go through that real quick. So if I can get there. Anybody see the final exam slide with the big-headed guy?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the final exam, it says 100, but it'll actually be 150 points. So it's about 10% or 15% of your final grade. It's mostly multiple choice with a few true and false, and then there's 2 essay questions like usual. The essay questions are available, and you can see them in this week's box. And so So it's a little bit more. It's the last thing I have from you graded, and so it's nice if you do well. It makes it easy to give you, you know, if you're on a borderline, it makes it easy to give you a higher grade if you do well on the final. If you're going the other way, it makes it very hard to give you the higher grade. Okay, so then kind of I have the usual study tips. It's, you know, college is all about how much effort you put into it and choosing the right study methods. And so we have almost a week left, and you should be studying a little bit each night. And particularly going over old quizzes, but choosing active methods like writing notes, trying to answer questions from old exams, making review sheets, doing your own quizzes, flip cards, or stuff like that. Those are important. And then it's important to recognize that you need breaks. People are going to remember things after sleep. Sleep is important, and so get your regular sleep. If you study only one night, you know, that's it's likely to be a jumble. And so it's best to spread it out. You'll understand it more if you spread it out. You'll remember it more if you spread it out. And that goes for any course. Again, it's too late to read the chapters if you haven't read the chapters, but you can read all the chapter summaries in you know, easily within a day. You can look at the vocabulary words. You can write out vocabulary sheets. There's lots of stuff for you to look at on Moodle. The hints for each chapter, that's helpful. And you can plan to have frequent short study sessions. Okay, that's, you know, it's hard to get huge chunks of time, but you can plan to have small bits of time here and there. And that's probably the way to go. So topics that I think are most important, it's kind of, you know, each chapter often has just a couple big ideas, and it's important to kind of think of also what are these big ideas, and that will help organize all the small details. And so like in the idea of homeostasis, that's a really important thing. It's covered in a bunch of places. It's mentioned first in chapter 1, but we go through all these negative feedback cycles on things like body temperature, calcium regulation. You know, there's just all sorts of them that we do, and we'll do them a lot in the following semester. So it's a big idea to get. And then for each organ system, we kind of had, what are the general functions? What are the general functions of the skin? What are the general functions of bone in the skeletal system? What are the general functions of joints, of muscle cells, of the nervous system? So you get this kind of general function thing everywhere. And then you get some specific physiological kind of mechanisms. How do bones grow and develop? So that includes that forming early and usually as a cartilage model, and then the bone replacing cartilage. And then after birth, you have these cartilage pads, the epiphyseal discs, and the bone gradually replaces that cartilage until the cartilage is all gone, and then you can't grow in length. The regulation of calcium, that's another really important one. How synovial joints function, the structure of synovial joints to provide strong connection, but a mobile connection. Another really important model or physiological thing is how muscle cells contract. How do they get the energy for contraction? What makes actin and myosin filaments slide past one another? What's going on when muscle cells relax? Those are all important things. The action potential that we have with muscle cells and nerve cells. What goes on at a synapse and neurotransmitters, the different brain regions, how the eye works, how the ear works, the sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the fight or flight response, the rest and digest kind of thing. And then just the neurological system, I talked about that. You know, and kind of in here, sometimes I talked about dysfunction. We talked about things like osteoporosis, skin cancer, talked about dementia and stroke. Those are important things. Oh, that is my phone is going off. Whoops, okay. So it's important to kind of recognize, I'll ask questions about all these important topics. Every one of them will be covered. And so I won't ask you new details, but stuff that we've already talked about. Let's see. You know, it's important to kind of figure out what's less important and what can you safely ignore, or what can you know, if you have a general idea, you can probably get through it. Lots of this less important stuff are stuff that probably is better discussed about in lab, or was kind of background, and you know, we're probably won't ask it too much, but you know, some of it might show up in other ways. Things like anatomical position, the terms of relative position, body regions, that's all lab stuff. I'm probably not going to ask any of that. Maybe one question, but it certainly won't have 3 or 4 questions or anything like that. Organ systems, body cavity, properties of water, organic chemicals. These are topics that it could come up, but they're not going to be major topics. There won't be multiple choices, multiple questions on them. Likewise, stuff on cell organelles like plasma membrane, you know, there was a big section on that in chapter 3. And, you know, that's more likely to come up when we ask questions about how the nervous system works or how the muscles work when we talk about action potentials there. You know, mitosis, protein synthesis, those are topics that, you know, it's possible to get a question, but probably not, you know, multiple questions, and it's not a major focus of what we're going in for in anatomy and physiology. Even less important, things that I'm unlikely to ask you about are, you know, atomic orbitals, parts of the atom. You're not going to get tissue ID questions. There's not going to be pictures of a bone or a joint or muscle ID. It's lab stuff. That's stuff that's, you know, we asked you in a lab exam possibly, or, you know, it's just better covered there, and it's not something that's probably going to show up. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on stuff like that? What's important, what's less important?
So basically, the questions that are going to be on the exam is questions that we've already done, either like on the quizzes or on previous tests.
I won't. Mostly yes.
Okay.
And even there'll be new questions that you haven't seen, because there's a huge pool of questions out there. But even then, it's going to be about stuff that we've already asked about. The same stuff is important. Okay, you know, like how a muscle cell contracts. That's important. But you know, what muscles in the, you know, what muscle are you sitting on right now? I'm not going to ask you that, because that's lab stuff. And you know, and so what muscle causes you to smile? That was kind of lab stuff. And so I'm not going to ask that. You know, I'll try and ask questions about similar topics. So it might be a different question, but it's about a topic that you've already been questioned about. Okay, so it's look at old exams, look at old quizzes, and not just the individual questions, but what it's asking you about. Okay, if it's a question about a neurotransmitter, that's, you know, neurotransmitters are important. I'm likely to ask another question about neurotransmitter. You may not have seen it before, but it's something that you've probably had a question on already. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just a quick review of important topics. Okay. Homeostasis is important. Okay, cells, the body works so that it can kind of maintain stable conditions inside. Okay, so that things don't fluctuate wildly within. Okay, that's because your cells, your organs, they function best in this narrow range of conditions. Okay, that's a pretty simple idea, but it explains a lot of what the cells are doing. Okay, the control systems that maintain homeostasis generally work by limiting change. Okay, so they detect change, okay, and then they counteract it. That's negative feedback. So it opposes change. Okay, so there's usually a sensor or receptor that detects the change, notifies the control center, which is usually the brain, or usually a gland, and then that control center sends a signal to oppose the change. So it's like the thermostat in your house. Okay, it detects when the temperature is falling in the winter. Okay, it's getting colder out, turns the furnace on, furnace runs till the temperature gets back up in the set range, and then the furnace turns off. Okay, and so that's negative feedback systems. It's the most common type of control system. Okay, then we talked about cells. Okay, so cells kind of, it's not a huge topic, but we're always talking about cells: muscle cells, bone cells, skin cells, nervous cells. Okay, so all your organs, they're made up of cells. Okay, and the active parts are the cells. Okay, and so cells are the smallest part. I'm not going to give you a picture of that general cell, but okay, bone cells. There's osteoblasts, osteoclasts, things like that. And so we want to remember that how cells function. All cells have a nucleus. All cells are functioning, have a plasma membrane, and so changes happen there. Okay, so I won't have specific questions probably that deal with the general cell, but I'll be asking you about nerve cells. I'll be asking you about muscle cells. Okay, there's a couple types of skin cells you should be familiar with. And so this was background, and we apply this all the time. Okay, cells are doing what cells do. And different cells have kind of different proteins that they make because they have different parts of their DNA active. Okay, and so it's probably not going to be, you're not going to see this picture or something like that. But I'll ask you about muscle cells. I'll ask you about bone cells. I'll ask you about skin cells. Okay. Likewise with tissue. Okay, there's not going to be anything where you have to identify tissues from a picture, but you have to know about the general tissue types and where you find them. So like the skin, the upper part of the skin is the epidermis, and it's made out of this stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, epitheliums are on surfaces, and so we would expect the skin to have an epithelium. Okay, and so these skin cells are producing keratin. Some other cells in there, the melanocytes, make melanin. Okay, and so it's a good example of probably not going to ask about just tissues, but I might ask about skin, and then you'd have to know about the cells and the tissues of the skin. Okay, and so we get to it that way. Okay, the other part of the skin is the dermis. Okay, that's the dense fibrous connective tissue. And it's a thicker layer of the skin, but it has lots of other stuff in it because lots of connective tissues have blood vessels and nerves and other things in them. And so that's where you see that stuff in the skin. Okay. For the skin, again, here is where I'm going to ask about functions of the organ. So you should be able to say, well, the skin works to protect us. It protects us from ultraviolet light by having pigment and preventing the light from hitting lower layers of the skin. Protects us from water loss, from abrasion, from infection, that kind of things. This negative feedback system where the body maintains a normal temperature. Okay, the skin is a big part of that. It's not the only part, but it's a big part of it. Okay, and then there's other functions in excretion and vitamin D and sensation. We talked about those last, but you should be able to list them. Okay, and so that's the kind of function thing that you should be able to do for every organ system. So here, skeletal system. I like this, with skeleton, without skeleton. You know, it's the skeletal system. It provides support, protects our organs, our brains. There's this cranium that protects our brain. Our rib cage protects our heart and our lungs. The skeletal system allows movement, but still allows growth. It stores calcium. It stores phosphorus. And that's important for homeostasis of calcium. It also stores fat. And we don't talk about it much, but it produces red blood cells, like our cells that transport oxygen. So it produces white blood cells that are active in immunity. So this kind of organ system type stuff, you should be able to do that. Yeah, this is, I'm probably not going to give you a picture there, but some of the parts of long bones are involved in different things. And so you should be able to take these parts and kind of say what's going on there. So like the epiphyseal disc, that's where the growth plate is. The periosteum, that's where a lot of the osteoblasts are in case your bone needs to grow or be repaired. You know, you have those regions, you should be able to link them to a function. Then that idea that bones are active and growing, so you have these epiphyseal plate, and that's kind of from the development of the bone. So that's active there. That's where your cartilage cells are making cartilage and your osteoblasts are replacing cartilage. Here, this is a big one. Calcium homeostasis. So another kind of system where we have a big negative feedback loop here that works. And in here, it's glands that are controlling things. So you have calcitonin when there's extra calcium. That's going to cause osteoblasts to store calcium in bone. Okay, and so that's, you know, for the skeletal system, that's a really big thing. But it also affects the GI. It also affects the kidney. And then when we're low on calcium in the blood, calcium is really crucial for muscle cells and nerve cells. For blood clotting, you need calcium. And so if calcium in the blood changes, that's a big deal. And so then you have another hormone. If it falls, the other hormone is parathyroid hormone. And that causes other bone cells, osteoclasts with a C, clasts, those cells will release calcium. So they'll make the bone thinner, but that'll get calcium back into the blood. And so that's important. Anybody have any questions here? This is a really important slide. This should look familiar, maybe.
Yep.
You could say, where is it here? I don't know what it says. Okay, you can give me a thumbs up, and say, yeah, that's familiar. I got that. Okay. And I don't have anything here, but there should be a slide here for the joints, on the functions of the joints. I just go right to the muscular system, but there should be a slide for functions of the joints, allowing growth, allowing movement, allowing shape changes. That's really important. And here's a function slide for the muscle system. Okay, the muscles produce the movement that's allowed by the joints. The muscles also hold things in position, so like posture. So I'm just sitting here, but my muscles are active to hold my head up. Muscles are involved in respiration. They produce heat that keeps us warm. They're involved in communication. My diaphragm and my muscles in my larynx and my throat, they're producing my voice. And then my facial communication, and that's the muscles of my face. And then we also have organs, muscles and organs, so producing movement in organs. So here's another part where we talk about cells. Muscle cells are very unique in that They have the regular organs, but they're kind of specialized. They have a specialized membrane for action potentials. That membrane brings these potentials close to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So it has these depressions, the transverse tubules. Then they have modified their membranes, internal membranes, to store calcium. So you have the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And then you have these bundles of protein that are going to produce the contraction, the myofibrils. Okay, so it's a modified cell. So we should be able to be familiar with that. And then the role of these structures in muscle contraction. Okay, that the filaments slide, they're made up of actin and myosin. And with the help of ATP and calcium, they form cross bridges. And that allows those things to slide past one another. That also requires a lot of energy. So muscle cells have some adaptations for energy. Most of them have lots of mitochondria, very good blood supply, store oxygen. The aerobic muscles, these are the slow oxidative muscles. Those appear reddish and are going to be resistant to fatigue. They're aerobic. Okay, the sprint muscles here, these guys are sprinters. Those muscles are the fast glycolytic. They have anaerobic adaptations, so they store lots of sugar. They only use sugar as a source of energy. They have a faster myosin, so their myosin uses ATP much faster, so they contract faster, they produce more power, but they fatigue. They produce muscle, lactic acid in those muscles. Okay, so kind of special cells. Okay, so then about a third of the course is nervous system. Well, like chapters, I think it's 11. Is it 11 through 16? Something like that. A third of the course is nervous system. And that here the function is sensory, motor, and integration. And so sensory brings stuff in, motor carries it out to the output, and then the integration is almost entirely done in the central nervous system. And so you should be familiar with the general functions and the divisions. With the central nervous system, that's the brain and spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system, that includes the cranial nerves, the spinal nerves, some ganglia in the coming off the spinal nerves. It includes the enteric nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is also that autonomic nervous system. Okay, and here again, we talk about how the cells work, and it's action potentials. The cells maintain a charge, and then when they need to be active, they quickly switch charge. They have a swing, so that if they're activated beyond a threshold, they become slightly positive. And this spreads all across the surface of the cell very, very quickly. When it reaches the end of the axon, that's where there's a synapse, a junction between two cells, usually a nerve cell and some other kind of cell. So at the synapse, usually there are vesicles that store chemicals called neurotransmitters. And when the action potential reaches that region, the neurotransmitters are released and they're going to signal other cells. So it's a chemical messenger molecule. Okay, and then we went into lots of anatomy here. And again, we didn't get to do the lab exam. There'll be some questions about brain areas. There could be a diagram. There could be questions on cranial nerves. But here I'm more interested in, again, linking structure to function. So you should be familiar with the major regions of the brain, the major regions of the cerebrum. You should be able to link these structures to functions. Okay, there's the cerebral areas, the lobes, frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital. Frontal lobes are motor, lots of motor stuff, and the prefrontal areas are kind of our conscious mind, our executive functions. The parietal lobe is a lot of sensory. Somatic sensory areas, that means skin receptors, muscles. It tells us what our body position's doing. In partly parietal, partly temporal lobe, you have more sensory stuff. You have auditory things. You have the general interpretive area in the temporal lobe. That's the Wernicke's area shown here. That this helps us interpret speech. The occipital lobe, again, lots of sensory stuff there. It's visual. In temporal lobe, you have some deep areas that are associated with memory formation and the limbic system and stuff like that. And so, yeah, here's frontal lobes. The executive functions, premotor areas. You can see how much is motor. Huge amounts are motor. But in the prefrontal areas, that's where you have that executive thing, working memory, thoughts, judgment, impulse control, that kind of stuff. You know, and so when you know, that's there. I didn't talk about it too much, but that's the last area of the brain to mature. So impulse control isn't really fully developed till you're an adult, and not 18. It's more like 25, 26, 27. So it's really longer. And that's where your judgments occur. And so again, that stuff happens. You know, many of you guys are 18 and 19. I'm sorry, you're still working on this, and that's why it's being 18, 19, and 20 is so hard, because you have these choices, and you're still working on maturing those areas. And then we did a lot of somatic nervous system stuff, and this is. The somatic nervous system stuff is conscious parts of the brain, and lots of sensory and motor stuff. And so we talked about the descending pathways. I'm not going to ask you the pathways, but that the motor pathways are descending, that there's multiple pathways, that they also involve other brain regions is important. Whoops, I got a misspelling in there. Okay, well, whatever. So there's direct and indirect pathways, and then these are going to activate the motor system. The somatic system also includes sensory stuff, and so they talk about sensory organs, like here the eye, and so here you have not just receptors, but you have whole organs that are modifying incoming sensory modalities like light, and then direct it onto the receptor surface. Here it's the retina. These are rods and cones, and so that the eye can focus light so that the retina gets a nice sharp image. The retina itself is made up of modified neurons that have pigments that absorb light, and those pigments, when they absorb light, they lead to an action potential. Okay, and so that's going to trigger the optic nerve to send a message to particular areas of the brain. Let's skip that. That's the pigment, rhodopsin, made of retinol and opsin, an enzyme that'll trigger the impulse. Here's the ear. Again, the incoming sound waves are modified, so they're picked up by a membrane, and they cause the membrane to vibrate, which the vibrations are transmitted through small bones and joints to a fluid, and the receptor cells are located in the fluid, and they'll detect movement in the fluid. These are the hair cells, and again, there's thousands of them there, and when they move, they're going to activate an action potential, which will then trigger a nerve that goes back to the regions of the brain that are involved in interpreting sound. So there's thousands of these, and the ones near the base of the cochlea are for sounds that are very low pitched. The ones that are near, or very high pitched, the ones that are near the very tip of the cochlea hear the low pitched sounds. And so what type of sound is determined by where the hair cells detect the vibrations. Okay. We also have hair cells involved in detecting movement of the head. And so in the case of the vestibule, this is a couple chambers that are in the inner ear that are closed chambers, what part of the vestibule is stimulated is determined by where these little bony otoliths kind of move to, and that's determined by gravity, and so that allows us to detect our head position. Okay, then we have 3 little loops of fluid inside the semicircular canals, and fluid can rotate in these canals, and this tells us about head rotation. And so we can rotate our head this way, or this way, or this way. And so we have 3 of these canals, and so you can have rotation. And again, which canal detects rotation most strongly helps our brain figure out which way the head is rotating. And again, it's hair cells and hair cells and fluid. Okay, so that's somatic nervous system. Then we talked about the autonomic nervous system. So this is parts of the, it's controlled by parts of the brain that are not conscious. And the system is a motor system, so it's activating muscles and glands, but these are ones we don't have conscious perception of. And this is different than the somatic motor system, because the somatic motor system is almost entirely skeletal muscle. Here it's smooth muscle and glands, and here the pathway is 2 neurons between the central nervous system. And in the somatic system, it's 1 neuron between the central nervous system and the skeletal muscle cell. And here, most of the organs are getting both innervation, from both parasympathetic nerves and sympathetic nerves. And so they can be told to do one thing or the other. Here, let's see, parasympathetic is shown on the right. That's got cranial nerves and sacral spinal nerves. And this is the system that promotes activity involved in digestion and in homeostasis when we're at rest. And so here there's a long first neuron and a short second neuron, and acetylcholine is released at the organ. And acetylcholine will cause the digestive system to gear up. It'll start producing more secretions, and the smooth muscle will contract, and food will be processed in the digestive system. Glands like the pancreas will be more active. The kidneys, there'll be more blood flow to the kidney. The bladder will be more likely to do things. And then the sympathetic system is shown on the left here. That's coming from thoracic and sacral spinal nerves. Or not thoracic and sacral, thoracic and lumbar spinal nerves. And here the first neuron is relatively short, and so there's a ganglia close to the spinal cord, and it's usually large, easily seen. And then there's a long second neuron that releases norepinephrine. And norepinephrine turns down digestion, turns down urine production, but it'll increase the heart rate, it'll increase respiratory rate, it'll cause the adrenal gland to secrete adrenaline, which is epinephrine, and that will prepare us for the fight or flight response. And so the skeletal muscles will become more active, and they'll be able to contract harder. Okay, that's a big picture there. And then the control of autonomic stuff is likely these visceral centers in the hypothalamus and the medulla. Hypothalamus is probably the most important one. Okay, so things like body temperature, food intake, water balance, digestion, endocrine system, these are going to be in these lower brain areas. You know, the hypothalamus is really crucial, but there's also pons and medulla have important things. There's a few things in the midbrain as well. This stuff is strongly influenced by the limbic system and by frontal lobe activity, although it's not conscious. You know, does anybody have any questions? This is familiar? Yes? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then the neurological exam is next. Chapter 16. And most of the thing you should kind of know is about mental status exam. That's probably the most important one. Our soon-to-be former president just had a mental status exam this year, and he was bragging about his results. Mental status exam is really looking for functions of the cerebrum and making sure you have your memory can function, that you can orient, you know where you are. Looking at your mood and kind of regulation and impulse control. Cranial nerve function can test the function of all these nerves. And so you'll look at, lots of them are involved in sensory of head, neck, and oral cavity, hearing, and things like that. So you can check that. Sensory and motor exam looks at cranial nerve function, spinal nerve function, spinal cord function. So you can detect changes there. You can localize injuries. And then the coordination or gait exam looks at some motor functions that are largely related to these motor pathways and then the cerebellum and things like that. This is important. It can be done very easily, quickly, and it can allow us to kind of look for problems that you would see. Lots of this, I talked about memory in there. A lot of this is done to look at memory. Memory is a very complex function. And so this is where I talked about memory and formation of new memory and what is normal for memory. And so you check a person's memory there. You have them repeat certain words, a series of words. You ask them about events. And that's all about looking at short-term and longer-term memory. Also, when you're talking about checking mental status exam, you're looking at emotional regulation and their ability to do some of these executive functions. These are prefrontal area stuff. And so sometimes you're looking at impulse control. Can they regulate their emotions? Is there kind of something going on that's funny, something funny with impulse control? And I mentioned that I had this for my parents, that I was doing these for my parents, and associated declines that really you didn't see till their 80s. And part of that was impulse control and mood regulation, that there were definite changes going on there. Signs of dementia here. That was another big thing for us to look for signs of dementia. Memory changes. Can they form new memories? That's anterior grade. If they can't, it's anterior grade amnesia. And can they correctly recall long-term memories? That's retrograde. And then you work with specific problem solving, balance, and coordination type stuff. Okay, that's a whole huge load. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. If you came in late, make sure your name is in the chat. Okay. Otherwise, that's. Lucretia, go ahead.
About grades.
Grades, yes.
How will we know our grade?
I'm going to dump a whole bunch of stuff. I've been working on it for a while. I'll dump a whole bunch of it today and tomorrow. So you'll have it all before then. Okay.
Did you get my email? I converted a lot of those.
I did,
over
Austin.
to
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
So the test starts is it next Friday?
No, it'll start, we were scheduled for the first day. So it will open on the 7th, Monday the 7th. And
Monday the 7th.
Monday the 7th. And then the 8th.
Okay.
So it'll stay open 2 days. So you'll have all day Monday, all day Tuesday.
Okay, so Monday or Tuesday we take the test. And how long do we have? Is it a 2 hour?
2 hours. It'll
Okay.
it'll be about 50% longer. So it'll be, figure like 60 questions with 2 essays.
Okay.
I don't know why I thought we had to take the test Friday.
Well, because we've done previous tests on Friday.
Oh,
But
okay.
final exams are supposed to be Monday through Thursday of next week. And we were scheduled, I think, for the first day. To me, that's kind of terrible. Like, this is one of the hardest courses. Why would you put it the first day? Give people a chance to study. So I'll open it the first day, but it'll also be open the second day. So you'll have two full days. Okay, again, chapter quizzes are open. Look at your chapter quizzes. Look at your old exams. Practice with those. Those quizzes will remain open to the 5th. Okay. I don't know. Does anybody have any last questions?
Can we review
When
the
is the
exam?
answer key for the practice test gonna be put
Okay.
on?
So I heard two questions.
Oh,
Review for the exam. You can. This is our review. Okay. There's the slides are available on Moodle. This is being recorded. I will post this. Okay. And so if you want to go back and look at it, there's, for reviewing, again, quizzes, old exams, chapter summaries, look at the guide for each chapter. Those would be things that you could do that are, you could quickly do those for every chapter between now and the time of the exam. And that's what I would recommend. You obviously can't read each chapter. That's crazy. Don't even try. Look at the important things. Hopefully you've already read the chapter. Skim the important parts. Look at the summaries. Look at your old notes. If you took notes, that would be a really good thing to look at. Okay.
Will we be able to actually review the exams? Because the exams were not, on mine, I couldn't review my answers to go back and look at what I answered on the exams. So will
think
that
you
be
can.
available?
I think you can. I will check.
Thank you.
Okay. And then Lupe asked about the key for the practice exam. I will put that there this Friday. Okay, so that should be there this Friday. You'll see that all before the weekend. Okay. Good questions. Anything else? Okay. All right. Again, Monday and Tuesday, check the old quizzes, exams. Make sure you've taken all the quizzes for a grade. Go back and look and just make sure you didn't miss one. And then for any that you didn't get a 10 on, go back and get a 10. Okay. I will see you later, hopefully. Sometime back at Highland. Perhaps next semester we'll all be here again. Who knows? All right. Okay, thank you. See you. Good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. I'll try and answer emails.